feel like Kobe in the fourth quarter.
This is the Day More NBA podcast, and we are brought to you by Prize Picks. Coming to you Saturday afternoon, it's December 27th, and we are sneaking in a weekend episode because that was just a really good Wolves-Nuggets basketball game on Christmas Day. We don't want to get too far away from that before doing an episode, so didn't want to wait until Monday to talk about it. So that's going to be this episode, Wolves-Nuggets talk, focus on that game. If you're listening to this on Sunday or maybe early next week, the Wolves will have already played Brooklyn by then. So it seems like we're missing something from that game. The reason is we were recording this on Saturday afternoon before that game has happened. I got Kyle Theige here with me. Before we jump in, we want to give our guy JC from Packed Hats some love from the two of us and from this show. Kyle, can you fill people in who may not know what's going on there and how we can help?
Yeah, we usually save the serious stuff for the end, but I felt like this was kind of in my strike zone of basketball and then cancer and all those concerns. So last Tuesday, our guy JC Packed Hats, who does the Nas Reed tattoos, a lot of you might have seen him at our Wolves Fest. Great guy, got a couple kids. He announced that back in like December 6th, he had found a brain tumor. And they expedited his care, so he's going to be getting surgery on the 30th down in Rochester, Minnesota at Mayo. As people know, listen to me all these years. My mom went to Mayo. My mother-in-law went to Mayo multiple times. And when you get cancer, the first thing is, I work in at 9 to 5 is you think about dying. And the thing you don't think about, but unfortunately you have to, is all the expenses that go into all the treatment and all the follow-ups and just like staying down there and bringing your family. So one of JC's good friends created a GoFundMe. The goal was like 25,000. Wolves Twitter blew that through the water like in the first couple hours. So I think it's up to like 55K now is the goal. And a lot of that money, again, just pays for the expenses of all the stuff that goes into JC fighting this. And we know he's going to fight it. So that'll be, I tweeted that out. We'll put that in the show notes. But we just wanted to send some love to JC and also to Wolves Twitter and also to like the org. Because when I found out about it on Tuesday before Christmas, I just sent it to someone high up with the team, and within a couple hours they had a whole plan in place and they connected with JC's family. So it's a scary thing to be going through. JC, we got you. I think a lot of people have your back and will be thinking about you, but also it's cool to see, during the holidays, which are supposed to be a celebratory time to spend with your family, JC's kind of fighting something right now. So go to my Twitter, look in the show notes, any way you can contribute. It really means a lot for an uphill battle, but one we know he's gonna crush, and we can't wait to have him, inking more people at our next Wolves Fest. So shout out to JC.
Yeah, I just want to clarify that to some people who might be listening to the show who aren't maybe on Twitter, or like their exposure to the Wolves might just be this and the games. And if you haven't heard about JC or Packed Hats, that's the Nas Reed tattoo guy. It's the guy who was doing the free Nas Reed tattoos a couple of years back when the Wolves were in the playoffs, went to the conference finals the first time. We, through Folly Knife, kind of connected with him, and he's been at a handful of our events doing little pop-up tattoo shops for us. I think he was at John's show a couple weeks ago as well. So very much a part of this greater community, which is a cool thing. And just from Kyle and I having at least some limited interaction with him, just one of those guys.
Yep,
who's clearly a good dude, and I just echo everything Kyle said. We're thinking about you and thinking about probably many of you out there too who are listening to this and going through something this time of year as well. I've said this before. My hope for this show is it's a healthy distraction, because I know sometimes in life we all need that, and sometimes in life we all need a little bit of help. So as to what Kyle said, that GoFundMe is in the show notes here below, and I'm sure you can find it anywhere on Wolves Twitter as well. So shout out our guy JC. Got a good basketball game to talk about, Kyle. Late. I don't know what I know you were out west, so it was a little bit earlier for you, but in my household, everyone was asleep by 9:30, and I was texting you. I was like, I might just watch this tomorrow. Like, this might be a Stranger Things and go to bed thing for me. I did end up watching that the whole game live, but just kind of sat there and watched it. I didn't do my excessive note-taking process as I normally do. Just as a cool reminder that the Wolves are back in a position to be playing in these games on Christmas Day, which is special, and to have a player like Anthony Edwards to make these games just really fun. It was as the clock struck midnight, it was pretty sweet to watch Ant go to work there. So I want to talk about Ant. I also want to talk about Jokic. Let's just kind of jump in right here with the Ant and Jokic duel as a way to start talking about this game. I'll let you take the lead with Ant, and then maybe I'll take the lead with Jokic.
Yeah, and let's just set the stage, because as we do a lot of these pods, we know that at this point, like, not everyone agrees on many things and rotations and coaching and roster and all that stuff. But that day, there was a holiday filter or a holiday multiplier, because it was the last game of a really good day of basketball, and everyone was either deliriously tired from waking up, playing the role of Santa Claus, or just drunk. Like, that's the one time I know that we were all watching that game drunk. And speaking of Stranger Things, that game literally turned upside down in the last 5.5 minutes when Ant subbed back in. I think they were down 11, no pun intended. And it was incredible, right? Like, it was Wolves Nuggets. It's the rivalry, like we said after the OKC game, a real rivalry, because these two teams have each beat each other in meaningful moments. But the Nuggets, shorthanded, no Christian Braun, no Aaron Gordon, came out and kind of gave it to the Wolves, led by Jokic. But then in that second half, specifically those final 5 minutes in overtime, you were reminded of why they used Anticlaus to promote that whole day and why Shams was in Minneapolis to hang out with him, because he went, I think he had, 20 points with 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. He had 14 in the first, had a shoulder injury, 20 points with 5 minutes left, and finished with 40. And he just went nuclear and brought them all the way back with that incredible three-pointer to tie it, to send it into overtime. And then to kind of throw it back to you, comes out cooking in that overtime. I think he had like maybe 8 of the first 9 points. And they built a 9-point lead. But then, unfortunately, the best player on the court took over and brought the Nuggets home. And it was just a really, really fun basketball game.
Yeah, just to start on the Ant thing, again, with just my basketball mind sort of off, just watching, and it reminded me of when Ant was just looking unstoppable and just going and going, and one of those situations where the opponent just doesn't have a thing for it. There's a select group of players who can kind of get to that level, not only in the NBA but kind of in NBA history. And I don't know, it got me thinking about Dirk in the Mavs Heat, 2011, 2012, whatever that is, where it just being one of those spots where Dallas, not with the best player maybe on the floor, but their best player was just unstoppable. And you could just go to it again and again, and X's and O's and coverage and who was guarding who aside. That's a fun and rare thing. And I was reminded of that, which I knew. I mean, we've seen Ant do this. Frankly, we've seen Ant do that in the playoffs pretty consistently in his career. But it's just from a basketball fun standpoint, those things, it's just cool to kind of sit to the side and watch the wave,
I was watching the game with my buddy Nick, who's a diehard Warriors fan from the Bay, and he kind of said something that made me think of why we micromanage all these games now and why everything feels more toxic, because he's a lifelong Steph fan. And when Ant is just building this snowball, he had 22 points with 5:14 left, and then he finished with 40 in the next 9 minutes of basketball. But he literally looked at me and was like, yo, you have one of those guys. And I think that's why we talk about the roster and all that stuff. Is like the Wolves, to your Dirk point, have one of those guys that can literally take over a basketball game. And he took over the final 5 minutes. He hits a shot. I don't know if you saw rewatching the game, but they're down 3 with 3 seconds left. Peyton Watson's on him, gets switched on to Jamal Murray. But Ant just says to Peyton Watson, are you going to foul? Just that mentality of just messing with his opponent. And he gets in the corner and hits that 3 and then doesn't really celebrate. That's when you kind of know, again, you got one of those guys. Is very nonchalant about it. He's like, okay, we got to get a stop and get in overtime. And then those first couple minutes of overtime, it was just one heat check after another to build that.
Didn't stop.
It didn't really slow down. And then it was up 9. Denver takes the timeout. And then I think that's where you got to, I mean, we can keep talking about Ant, but that's where you got to pivot to the Jokic stuff, because then it was two of the next three possessions, the same inverted pin down to get Nikola Jokic, of all players, these 3-point opportunities, and he hit them both. And I mean, he finished with, what did he finish with? 50 or a 60-point triple double, or no, 55, right?
56.
56.
Yeah. All right, I have it right here.
I was saying, because I saw the tweet that Jokic now has a 20-point, 30-point, 40-point, 50-point, and 60-point triple double, all against the Timberwolves. So, yeah.
56, 16, and 15 for him. He shot 11 of 15 from 2 and 4 of 6 from 3. I mean, just total cyborg shit. He's absolutely insane when he has an advantage. He is relentless in going at it. And I thought, not to take away from the overtime and how Ant finished, or even how Jokic finished the game, just kind of putting that final nail in the coffin late in overtime. I just thought it was a whole interesting guarding Jokic matchup, as this team has necessarily had to move into a new plan against Jokic when they beat Denver in the playoffs 2 years ago. The plan, and it worked well, was to put Cat on Nikola Jokic, have Rudy Gobert kind of lurk, as people, longtime listeners of the show, know we talked about that endlessly. At that time, they put Ant on Murray, and they would put McDaniels on Michael Porter Jr. Well, the chessboard has changed. There's different pieces out there. Obviously, no Porter Jr. for them. Aaron Gordon wasn't out there in this game, but critically for the Wolves, Karl Anthony Towns, his presence was not there to take the primary Jokic look, which is the best thing the Wolves do, is when they have Rudy helping and Cat or someone else on Jokic. Now, they don't have as good of options as Cat in that matchup, and they started the game going with Randle first on Jokic, with Gobert trying to help. He was helping off of Spencer Jones. When Reed came in, they went to that. And now that doesn't mean every single possession is going to be that way. Obviously, there's certain times in a scramble where Gobert is going to pick up Jokic, and ultimately Gobert ended up getting in foul trouble throughout that game, largely while guarding Jokic on switches and things like that. But what I took away from the game is, I think the Wolves have an okay approach for this, provided Rudy isn't in foul trouble. Like, the Reed or Randle on Jokic option works well enough in the context, I think, of how good Jokic is. But when you take Rudy off of the floor and it becomes Reed and Randle as the two bigs out there, it's kind of what we feared after that New York game, does this team have anything for a scoring big when Rudy Gobert is off the floor? And for a Karl Anthony Towns caliber player, Nikola Jokic, maybe a Şengün, some of those other guys around the league, I don't think this team has that. And it just highlights what they are going to need to do in this matchup against Jokic. Like, Rudy's going to need to not be in foul trouble, because he's going to need to be out there for as many minutes as possible in this matchup. And if he's not, the guy is going to do 50 plus points, triple double. And he had that 60, 20, and 20 last year. And that was also another game, that Rudy fouled out there. So just one thing I wrote down during the game, maybe it's a little reactive to this one game against Denver, or these last two against New York and Denver with the scoring bigs. But for me, when I think about changes that this roster needs to make, or answers that it needs to find, a position that isn't the position that's most not right, for me, I'm at backup center above backup point guard. I think this is proving to be more of an issue that I think caps this team's ceiling than the backup point guard bit is. And we've gone into that, and there's problems with that. But I think we see this team finding at least some answers to the backup point guard bit, of playing through Ant a little bit more, Bones Highland kind of coming in. And this isn't, not that they've solved that perfectly, But I do think the Reed and Randle minutes and the lack of there being a backup 5 on this team that can guard in those times, especially against a good player, that I see as a bigger issue for this team right now than the backup point guard position, which is in part, I think, a compliment to Ant and to this team figuring out some of the backup point guard piece. But as we sit here at the end of 2025 and I go, number one, like roster construction issue with this team, that I think is probably somewhat reasonably solved with the trade or something like that. There's pathways to fix it. To me is the backup 5 position. And so I thought that was, representative of something that happened in this game that was representative of a important theme for this team, that unless things kind of go perfectly, where Rudy can play really well and play really well without fouling, it just doesn't seem like they have enough to slow a guy like Jokic to, and I'm talking slow of like 40 points, right?
I know. I can
shut him down.
I can imagine my dad listening to this be like, he was 56, 16, and 15, and you guys said Rudy played really good. It's like, yeah, Rudy was a plus 18. Like, they were really good in those Rudy Gobert minutes. If you're going to say the backup center thing, I do think we have to just clarify that they have a center on the roster that one day I think is going to be relied upon heavily. But this is not a moment. You cannot watch Thunder or Wolves Nuggets on Christmas and say Baron J should get those minutes. You can't give the kid who was playing midfield 4 years ago backup minutes against the smartest player to maybe ever play the game. So I'm with you on that. Like, they don't really have a lot of answers. I think they threw the whole kitchen sink at Jokic. I mean, there were possessions where it was Jaden kind of isolated, and I thought he held his ground. There was possessions, I mean, after they ran those 2 inverted pin downs to get Jokic those threes, which, by the way, I don't know if you knew this, Nikola Jokic, who's won multiple MVPs, is averaging a career high 5 attempts from 3 and shooting a career high 45%. Right? Like, if that's a real thing for the next 52 more games into the playoffs, like, truly, like, this is like, we know we have to probably at maybe one point get through Mahomes. We need more edge rushers. Like, you do have to find more bigs to put out there. But also, back to the Rudy point, like, I thought, again, plus 18, I thought he did play really well despite giving up historic points, rebounds, and assists. But I also think he has to be
wasn't guarding him until like the 4th, really, like,
right. But he has to be smarter of, like, even that, like, that half court foul. Like, I know it was kind of like a 50-50 thing, but like, he has to manage those fouls. Like we've always said, Jaden needs to manage his 6 fouls when he's guarding a Luka or something. He cannot put himself in situations like that to be, he's not going to win 50-50 calls against Jokic. So I thought they did a really good job. I do think the devil's advocate is that the Nuggets ran out in this game Spencer Jones, Peyton Watson, and Tim Hardaway, and they all played 40 minutes. Like, what is that defensive coverage going to look like when, Cam Johnson, who hasn't been an awesome addition so far,
it's not Spencer Jones who's open.
It's guys who have taken big shots compared to guys who have never. So that'll be a wrinkle that, I mean, the Nuggets are 3-0 now against the Wolves, and we're very depleted and still won. But can you send those matchups? Can you trust, the Julius and Nas stuff when there's better shooters out there? That kind of time will tell. But I did think for the most part,
there's like, that group can't play defense well. So if there's going to be better offensive players out there for Denver, it's you run it 100 times, it's going to get worse. So that's kind of why this is glaring to me, is like, I don't think, like, they cannot run out that lineup against Jokic where it's like they did at the end of the first quarter, where it's Reed, Randle out there against Jokic, and so there's no Gobert out there and there's no McDaniels out there. Like, that's only going to get worse. And it was already catastrophic in this. Like, every single time when Rudy picked up his second foul and he had to go to the bench, what was the first thing Jokic did? Grab the ball, top the key, attack Julius.
Mm-hmm.
When he grabbed his third, when Rudy got his third foul, his fourth foul, he had to go to the bench. Like, they are going to attack that. And when there's more shooters, when it's Aaron Gordon instead of Spencer Jones, and it's Cam Johnson instead of Peyton Watson out there, that's only going to get worse. So I take it to be like, I don't even know if you could play that if it's a playoff series where Rudy and Jaden are both off the floor there. I think a Finch nitpick in this game is like, look, if you're if you're not going to have Rudy out there, Jaden has to be out there, and probably Jaden and Jalen have to be out there, just trying to survive some of these periods of time. When Jokic is out there and the Wolves have that type of defensive personnel out there, it just to me, it seems like you need to get so lucky for it to even break like close to your direction, and push those minutes.
Yeah, and then that just makes me think, like, if that's the backup plan, I think you just have to find a backup center, because as good as Jaden is, I don't know if that's going to be profitable. Just on the Jokic thing for a second. I mean, again, they were down a bunch of guys, so he had to not only facilitate for everyone else, but also he had to go get 56 points. Do you kind of subscribe to the idea more of like making him like at full strength, making him a scorer, or making him more of a facilitator?
Scorer, and that's what the Wolves always do. Of part of the reason why he has these 40-point, 50-point, 60-point games against the Wolves is, I think, the Wolves, as much as anybody, or as much as like the primary teams do, they prioritize like taking away the surrounding options and living, kind of with Jokic being a 40-50 point type of guy. And they've won games like that. They won the 60-20-20 game last year. I think Jokic's preferred way to play would be to distribute first and score second. And so I think they take away his preferred option. The problem is with him making him a scorer, the Wolves just don't have enough resistance, or it feels like they have to have like the perfect personnel out there playing at the perfect energy level and all of those things to be able to slow him. And I do, like I said off the top, I think like they have some answers to make this like somewhat workable. But in certain lineup combinations, to me, it seems like, and those lineup combinations being Reed and Randle out there and Gobert and McDaniels not, like, I don't know how you ever win those. I don't know. Like, I don't know how you can walk into that expecting to win those minutes, or frankly, even really being very close. So yeah, that's right.
And I also think for Jaden and Rudy specifically, as good as the Rudy Gobert Defensive Player of the Year #5 campaign really started a game ago. But they have to be even better, because on those 2 threes that Jokic hit in overtime, they were attacking Jaden and Rudy. And I don't know if it was miscommunication or what, but like, those are your 2 best defenders. And you have to know in that spot, like, he's looking for this shot. Like, he's not just looking to get the ball and then, post someone up. Like, he was looking for threes, and he got 2 great looks. And that's part of the reason, again, this game, we should have said this at the top, but this went from like a bad loss to a really fun win to a really bad loss, all in the span of 3.5 hours. And they just couldn't find a way defensively. I mean, I thought it was the defense that led to the offense in those final 5 minutes of the fourth quarter. Yeah. And then in overtime, it was really Ant starting out hot. And then the defense just completely failed them, both on the Jokic threes and then in transition against Tim Hardaway Jr.
Yeah, that's a weird part about it, is like a lot of what made this game good was the Wolves defense and the turnovers that they forced in the times when they needed it, which was somewhat of a neutralizer to Jokic's potency. And then Ant was the other thing that came close to neutralizing him as well, just by his extreme shot making at the end of the game. So yeah, I say that to be like, this is somewhat close as a matchup, right? So I'm looking at, what do the Wolves need to get better at in this matchup to have a better chance at winning, especially factoring in the idea that when they play them in the playoffs, if they do, it'll be an even better Denver team with a Gordon, a Brown, and a Johnson out there for them. So we'll see. But I love these matchups against this team, and I think it makes for a really interesting basketball conversation, because it's Jokic is such a unique guy to need to strategize for. I want to keep going on this, but Kyle, let's let people know that we will be at Treasure Island Resort and Casino on Saturday, January 17th. The Wolves play the San Antonio Spurs, which I think should be, one of these fun games that we're talking about, an intense game against a high level Western Conference opponent. Kyle and I will be doing a live show that night before the game. at Treasure Island and then staying to watch the game, as we did a couple times last year at Treasure Island for a watch party. So it's a 5 p.m. happy hour, a 6 p.m. live recording of the show, and 7 p.m. will be tip off for Wolves Spurs that night. They'll have free food, prize giveaways, and just a lot going on there. We'll be spending the night there. And if you, as listeners who want to come down and hang out for the night, if you would like to get a room as well, you can use the promo code Wolves to earn 20% off a one-night hotel stay. You can do that online, or if you call in to book yourself a room there. We'd love to see y'all down there, and you can visit ticasino.com for more information and to book yourself a room if that's something you'd like to do for that night. You have anything quick on that, Kyle?
No, I'm excited. The Spurs right now have we're the longest winning streak in the league, 8 games. They have the 3rd best record in the West. So I think that'll, that as we talk about cupcake schedule, whatever, like that's going to be a really big game, especially a month from now, like kind of feeling yourself of, where are we as an organization in the West, and it leads 2 weeks into the trade deadline. So Wolves Spurs should be a really fun one, and it'll be fun to kind of watch that game with a bunch of people.
I want to keep talking about this game, and I'm going to move kind of through the lens of Randle, because I think that ties to the Ant piece we were talking about at the beginning and the defending Jokic piece of it. I feel like in this matchup against Denver, Julius can be pretty potent offensively. He scored 30 in this game. I think he had pockets of time, right before the Ant really took over in the fourth. There was a big Randle spark in that fourth quarter there to get the Wolves kind of in a rhythm going into that clutch time where they made the big comeback with 3 minutes left in the game. And to me, getting that from Julius is pretty critical in this matchup, as yes, they have a good option in Ant. They don't really have a guy who can guard him at a point of attack. They don't really have a guy to present resistance for Ant at the rim. And they don't really have that for Julius either. And I think this needs to be one of those matchups where the opponent really feels and fears the Wolves' individual offensive creators. And I thought at times during this game they did for both Edwards and Randle. They seemed like real problems for Denver. But what I was thinking about it is, like, I'm going in that game, I'm thinking I need a great Julius game offensively, because we got to be able to impose that onto the Denver defense. And what I'm thinking about is, how realistic is it to get a great Randle offensive game against Denver while asking him to kind of push that sled of defending Jokic as much as he does in this matchup? That's what I kind of struggle with here. I think you would get a better Julius game overall if he wasn't on Jokic as much as he has to be, though he kind of has to be, because that's the best defensive look that they have, is when they can put Randle on Jokic and have Rudy lurking off there. But do you get what I'm saying there? Is I just feel like Julius is so important in this one offensively, and that you just need a good offensive game. It feels like a little bit of a rock and a hard place type of deal for me.
Yeah, and again, I think you have to add the caveat. He had 32 points, tied for the most he's had since October 29th against the Lakers. So a big offensive production performance from him. But, I mean, you can't watch him play and not think of Aaron Gordon, right? Not be in there, because I would imagine it would have been a big Aaron Gordon spot. And you have Cam Johnson and Christian Braun on Ant. So with the guys that he was going up against, it's like, yeah, we really need you to produce offensively. And I think you make a great point. It's what we talk about with Ant sometimes, like, hey, we need you to really carry the load offensively tonight. And how much of your battery, if you're 75% trying to be offensive production, how much can you give defensively? So I did think it was a good game for him. I thought, especially that comeback in the fourth was led by a couple of him just getting downhill, getting and ones. I didn't know this until our friend Jack Borman tweeted it out, but his 3-point percentage, have you just been like tracking that month by month? He shot 47% from 3 in October, 31% in November, and 28% in December. And then he in overtime, he kind of took, I wasn't mad that he took that shot when they needed a bucket after they had blown the 9-point lead, but it was more of like, I don't want you to take that shot. So if he can do a lot of his work down in the post, get those and ones and get to the foul line, that's huge. But yeah, I don't know how it's just got to be grueling, right? Like, can you just break it down for a human level for a second to be like, I have to be, it's not just the physicality of defending a 290-pound polar bear, but it's the mental aspect of you have to be so locked in because every second he's moving the chess pieces around. But then on the other side, like, hey, like, I don't know if this team can win a series against the Nuggets without Julius, giving you multiple 30-point games. And that's just a lot to expect from him.
Yeah, no, I think it's to continue the weird pushing the sled analogy. It's like if you're a receiver at practice and before you went and ran your route, you had to go push that like sled thing, like for 5 yards, and then you can go run your route
for 3 minutes. Yeah.
yeah. It's just and I think Julius like does kind of fight it, and he understands the importance of the Jokic matchup, and to your point, 30 plus points, while guarding him. I don't know. To me, it doesn't feel like the right balance of what to be prioritizing in that game. Though, again, that's why I say the rock and a hard place sort of thing is, well, you can't, if it's really important to have Gobert lurking off of Jokic because he can't guard Jokic one-on-one, then somebody needs to be guarding Jokic as the primary before the help. Okay, our two options there are Reed and Randle.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't want Randle to be doing that for this theory that I have, okay, well, then it needs to be Reed. And now the situation is, okay, well, if Reed's out there, then Julius isn't out on the floor because Rudy has to be out there to be the defensive piece. Or you could go with all three of them. And as I was going down that thing, I was like, man, I think that's something this team needs to establish what it has in with the three big lineup. Like, is that a thing? I feel like against some of these opponents, especially the ones that they can't guard, who have these great bigs, great scoring bigs, I think you got to fire like brute strength against brute strength in that, and need to be able to go with a Gobert, Reed, and Randle lineup out there as like part of the actual plan. Now, that's never like blown us away with any numbers, right? It's never been something that Finch has really relied on, but as we talk about like developing things over the course of the season to see if there's something there, as they have done, with a Jalen Clark or a Terrence Shannon Jr. or Rob Dillingham, you know what I mean? Like kind of mining to see if there's any gold here. I just think I would like to see some different like lineup combination things and take some more risks in that way to see if you have something. Because don't you think it would be a cool weapon to like have in your bag going into the playoffs against whoever your opponent is, of like, yeah, we can flip the switch and go to Gobert, Reed, Randle, McDaniels, Edwards here. Like, that's gotta be a problem to some opponents. And I think the Wolves can make this that way, or at least I'd like to see that plant like get watered a little bit. And this matchup and some of the things that I just felt like were incongruent was like, I wish they had that gear to go to, because I think you get to the Randle piece of this. I think you get an even better Randle game if you can find that.
It also would have helped, right? Against the team through 30 games, the Nuggets are light years, like number one right now in offensive rating by like 2.5 points clear. Like you and Britt were talking about how like this Wolves team right now seems like they're a more offensive minded team than a defensive minded team. So if you're going to fight fire with fire, it would have helped on Christmas for anyone else to show up. So like in that Nas Reed lineup, if he's playing essentially a 4 bigs and Ant, like, can Nas be more productive? I mean, this was one of those games again where I joke, like, they had 7 players, like not even any of them were always good. Like Dante he did all the other stuff. He had 2 steals and a block and 4 rebounds in that fourth quarter, but like he didn't hit a 3. So I don't want to make this sound like, oh my God, Julius, could you have done more in that game? I think we're trying to balance out the split offensive defense, but this Nuggets team is an offensive, like, we talk a lot about OKC, but this Nuggets team, even with the guys they're missing, is so good offensively. They're going to have to find more and more ways. I mean, basically, I was trying to say, like, Julius is going to almost have to average 30 in a playoff series against the Nuggets for them to have a real good chance. And they're going to need more guys like Nas or Dante or anyone that's either on the roster or off the roster to help produce. They had a good Jaden game. I think he finished with 21, but everyone else that checked into the game gave them very little offensively. And that's a tough pill to swallow against the best offense in the league.
Yeah, I guess that's why I'm just kind of like throwing things out there or thinking about this all like bigger picture is because that Denver offense is so good, and it's the same when we talk about the Wolves and the Oklahoma City matchup. It's like we have to kind of look at the Wolves and Oklahoma City matchup through what we know that Oklahoma City team presents, right? And the defense that it presents and the style of play that they play with. And I feel like learned and I've understood stylistically a better idea of what they need to do against Oklahoma City. And that's different than it is against the average opponent, or, you're just kind of run of the mill base plan. And I think that Denver's on the other side of that, where you need to go in planning accordingly, doing some things differently to be like, look, we just understand the reality of the situation is this might be the best offense ever. So we need to be extraordinarily intentional about mitigating that offense. And I think if you do that, you start getting more meticulous with who you're playing, when you're playing them, so as to have like your best defensive groupings out there for as much as you possibly could. And a lot of it had to do with Rudy's foul trouble, which just threw off some of that plan there. But I don't know. If you want to beat them, I just feel like you have to have a really good plan. And the last time they beat them in the playoffs in the 23-24 season, they had a really good plan for beating them. And I felt like they did the best possible thing. Finch did the best possible thing he could with that roster in that playoff series to maximize it. And all I'm saying, I don't know what all the answers are. I don't feel like they've totally found what that best possible plan is against Denver, which is evidenced by being 0-3 against them thus far this season. But I don't think we've seen all of it yet. Like, I think there's still marginal tweaks around the edges to, in terms of how you play and who you're playing out there, to be like, yeah, we had the right people out here and we're going for the right things for all 48 minutes of this game, because that's what's necessary to compete with Nikola Jokic, which, by the way, we know we can do because we have Anthony Edwards on the other side of this thing and a potent offense of our own. It's just, to me, it's like, man, got to be super intentional and meticulous against these best teams in the Western Conference. And that's just a couple degrees off to me. And I think that's why this game was a couple points differential, at the end, and why Denver ultimately came back to win.
You mentioned something about having the right people out there. I mean, they wake up today before the Nets game and they're 20-11, pretty good record. But they are 0-3 against Denver, and that's going to be a mountain they're probably going to have to climb. But it does kind of circle me back, not to be a wet blanket, of like, do they have the right people on the roster? Because they just cut the Mike Conley thing at halftime and just said, we're not going to play you. And then Terrence got hurt. There was an update as we're recording that he's going to be reevaluated in 2 weeks. But like, if this becomes a shootout in the playoffs against what could be the best offensive ever, like, I think Terrence probably in August and September was part of that plan. Like, okay, we're going to get some production from him off the bench. Nas Reed now is a $100 million guy. Like, you got to be more 18 points, 20 points a game, not 13. I just don't know if they have the firepower off the bench to keep up with them. So I also think you were talking about kind of experimenting, right? Like, can we see the three big lineup? I don't know. Like, I don't want to be pessimistic, but they haven't always shown a propensity to want to experiment, because it does seem like we're trying to grind more wins. And I just wonder, this was the whole gap year thing last year. At what point does that bite you in the ass? Like, at what point do you need to I still think you can win against the Nets by experimenting, right? Because you probably just have just an absolute talent advantage. But yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I would have loved to have seen just a three big lineup against Denver, and on a night where they were smaller, right? Like, they don't have Aaron Gordon at the 4, so you could have maybe abused that situation. But I don't know. It was fun because it was Christmas and it was late, and they came back and they got into overtime. But I did leave that in the next morning being like, man, I just don't know if they have enough guys for a firefight against that type of team.
Yeah. And so I think that might be right too. And I think that can be addressed at the trade deadline to some extent, right? Like, that's at least an open box of, like, whether it is addressing backup point guard or backup center or however they see fit to address it. Like, I think they probably need that to be able to go into a playoff series against Denver and be able to come out with a win. But I don't know what's in that box. I don't know exactly how to go there. We can talk about. We've been talking about fits of Kobe White, a Colin Sexton, bit, like some of those sort of things. What I'm just trying to focus on right now, or at least in the immediate aftermath of this game, is how many buttons do they have internally within the roster to be able to match up with Denver and specifically Jokic better, because it's getting a little ridiculous of what he's doing to this team every single time. As a guy who's always ridiculous, but like, this is too easy. I just think this is, I think we're at the point where everything is too easy for Jokic right now. And for me, that would make me start to think outside of the box. Again, whether that be through trade, but maybe more imminently, in reflection of this game of like, well, what can we do differently with the group that we currently have? How do we get an even better Ant in this game? How do we get Rudy to play? What's our strategy of we're really focused on needing Rudy for 34 minutes in this game? How do we handle matchups accordingly based on the risk of foul trouble? Because foul trouble is a real thing here. How much of Julius's energy do we want to apply to the defensive side for the offensive side? You know what I'm saying? Like, there's some of these like marginal things along the way there too that it sounds like I'm picking at, but I'm picking at it because I think there's something better there. I think there's a world out there that this team can play the Denver Nuggets and Nikola Jokic and make him a scorer first without having him average like 48, 14, and 18 or whatever, that's got to exist. So that's got to exist. So I don't have the answers for it, but I want to.
There's definitely some meat on the bone too of like Ant had those 14 points in the first quarter, and then the next 30 minutes of game action he had 8. And I don't think he scored in the second quarter, and he had like 4 points in the third. So I think there's more opportunities to get him going again. I think in this matchup, if you just
maybe no shoulder injury too,
Yeah, and I didn't even see that in the moment. But if you think big picture, if these teams are both healthy come playoff time, like doesn't Aaron Gordon match up obviously against a Julius, and like do they put multiple wing guys on Ant? But I think there's more opportunities there for Jaden too, because I think he's kind of a black box a little bit of. I don't really know who they have on the roster to defend him. And you've seen him be able to take on more offensive opportunities and expectations. And I think he's kind of like a wild card in trying to get more. Because, obviously, too, not just the production and getting to the mid-range, or he feels more comfortable now shooting threes, but also just his ability to play make, right? Like he can get Rudy a little more engaged. And that's, as much as you're talking about all of the Jokic stuff of how do they slow him down, I really think a dumbed down way to slow down Jokic is to make his ass work on defense, right? Because he too has limited energy. And I just think, they don't have.
That's what I'm talking about the Randle thing too, man. Yeah. Like if Randle's a problem for them to guard, then that's going to it's going to be a problem because Jokic isn't resistance for him at the back line of it. And now Jokic is being more demanded of him defensively. Like that's part of what I'm talking about here too. With maximizing Julius in this matchup offensively, because then I think it's going to take from Jokic's battery. So I'm like, we've seen that too. That's real. He's not actually an alien, he's not perfect every minute of the game.
He is so good, but he has, especially without Aaron Gordon out there, like he has no interest in rim protection. I think that's kind of what you're trying to get at, is just like make him work so hard on the defensive end, just so that on the offensive end, not just now we're talking about two sides of the court. It's all the little stuff. When we were rewatching the game, like just the little nuanced things that I don't know if you want to get into officiating, but like that delay a game call on Ant when he swiped down the ball 4 minutes earlier, Jokic was pointing out that Jaden was doing all that shit and Julius did it once. And like, he just Chris Paul's his way throughout that whole game. And at some point, if you make him work more and more on the defensive end, it's just going to tire him down a little bit. I know that sounds very mundane, but I do think the more you talk about it, like the more he has to work defensively, the less productive he's going to be offensively, just like we talk about with Ant all the time. So that's definitely something they're going to have to look at. I don't know if they play again this season, but so far they've not shown the answers for a Nuggets team that again is absolutely humming offensively, even without Michael Porter Jr. in the mix.
Today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks, and it might seem like your fantasy football season is over because you got knocked out of your fantasy playoffs, but it's only week 17, which means there are still meaningful games going on in the NFL, which means it's still pretty fun to put together a Prize Picks daily fantasy lineup. More or less than 74.5 rushing yards for Derrick Henry against Green Bay this week, more or less than 212 passing yards for Justin Herbert against Houston's defense. All you need to do is pick more or less on 2 or more players to put together a Prize Picks lineup. If you're out of your fantasy football league, this is a way to keep playing. Just play for $5. If you don't have a Prize Picks account, all you have to do is put in the promo code DANE when you sign up, and you will receive $50 in lineups when you play your first $5 lineup. Put together, a Prize Picks lineup on Sunday. Why not? You're going to be sitting there watching football anyways. That's prizepicks.com or the Prize Picks app using the promo code DANE when you create your account. Kyle, let's wrap it up by talking about officiating a little bit. And I mean, we could talk about that like thematically from that game. And obviously it's what led to Ant being ejected from the game. It's what led to a lot of, visible frustration on the floor with the foul call on Dante in overtime and all those many things that happened. And, the presence of Scott Foster. I think, I'm not one to really dwell on officiating too much in general or from a specific game. My problem with Scott Foster in general, watching the Wolves or watching him officiate any other game, especially when he knows that it's, nationally televised and there's just more camera.
Mm-hmm.
To me, he tries to assert himself into games to be one of the main actors on the floor. And I think that leads to games closing the way that one did, which is just like an unfortunate kind of fart of a end of the game. You know what I mean? Where you're just like, why did this have to be the way that this ended? And I would say like the same thing too, if it was a couple of like him asserting himself in a way that disadvantaged Denver, it just would throw off the end of the rhythm of that game. I don't like the degree to which Scott Foster puts himself into the end of these games, and that's bad for the basketball product of it. It's bad for the Wolves' like collective mental health on the team in the midst of a game. So I think that piece is very unfortunate from it, and I think there was obviously some bad calls that happened throughout the course of the night, but I'm more just officiating is such a thing right now with this team, from the Finch tirade after the Oklahoma City game that worked obviously and got them to kind of shift the way they were calling the game, or at least appeared to. I don't really know what to do with the topic other than just be like, I don't know. It just it feels like a problem most nights, and it doesn't feel like this is something that the Wolves have a good composure about as a team overall, and that seems like something it's not their fault, but that they'll need to get, I don't know, in the line, right, for the playoffs. Like this collective sort of hate towards the officials all the time. It feels like bad juju to me, and I don't know. Sucks to be talking about, but it sucks that it's getting in the way of the basketball is my real thing.
I have no interest in talking about this, but it's also like impossible. You can't really not bring it up. Scott Foster was so horny to call that delay a game tech on Ant. And it reminded me, I don't know if you watched Rams Seahawks a couple Thursdays ago in overtime. Yeah. Sam Darnold had that dot 30 yards to cup, and that official ran in and just did like a hump motion of like, caught it. And it was like, this is not about you. I think the thing that gets me the most about officiating is not necessarily, I mean, Luka played on Christmas, Shea played on Christmas, Wemby played on Christmas. Like, some of these other guys do just get a different whistle than Ant. I would imagine when Ant watches a game with his friends, it's like, man, I cannot believe some of the calls he gets. for me, it's just across all the games or any sport. It's just like the inconsistency of calls. Like I hate the cliche in sports of, oh, you can't call that in that spot. It's like, no, if it's a foul, right? Like pass interference under 2 minutes. It's like, if that's pass interference, throw the flag. I just don't think there's a consistency level there. And yeah, this is kind of like the byproduct of how fun it was when your coach got ejected and he maybe changed the whistle. Like this team, and we're really close to this, so I try to pull myself out of it, but I don't know. Like I really do think the Wolves hate officials more than any team in the league or have a worse relationship with them, just because, I mean, it starts at the top and their coaches, we joked about the going into the locker room thing, and there's screenshots and photos and mugshots of all the officials that night and kind of what they do and how they call things. So the relationships are bad. I mean, I think the inconsistency though is probably what drives them the most crazy. I thought the foul on Dante was really tough. But the league 2-minute report said it was correct. But I think they used the word drifting into Jokic's space when he caught the ball. It was hard not to harken back 2 possessions ago when Ant went to the rim. And 290 pounds of Jokic is drifting into Ant, and he finished over him, and he doesn't get a call. So, and between those 2 possessions, Ant had that layup where you can hear him get fouled, and they don't call it. So, I don't know how, other than like a come to Jesus moment of like, and I think it does have to go to Finch too, right? Like you can't be so openly abrasive against the officials. I joked about being the dad, like, because then the kids all think that way, but I just think in general, man, like the morning of Christmas started with the video of Shams at the practice facility and he's hooping with Ant, and like they're really trying to build this as maybe the face of the league or whatever. And then the last game of the night on Christmas, I really do think he has to do something egregious to get tossed. Don't throw him out of that game. And of course I'm biased, but I would say that about any star player. Like let the star players finish the game. And I just think it's bad that we know so many officials' names in 2025. Like that to me is like the worst. Like, why do we know the names of 42 different officials before a game starts? So I don't know how you fix it. I don't know how you address it. It's a league-wide issue. It's a sports-wide issue now across football and stuff too. So it's a bummer because we should not be talking about that. We should be talking about that Jokic was historically good and pulled him back. And then the Wolves kind of, choked it away at the end, but we shouldn't be talking about the officials.
Yeah. It's a weird experience being at games. And so like at the game, right, you have we have the monitors right in front of us. And so you're seeing the replay and you're hearing the announcers kind of if you're listening to the TV broadcast, like explaining what's happened there. And there's so many times where it feels to the fans in the stadium that it's egregious, right? Egregious miscall. But actually, the Wolves don't challenge it because they've looked at it again. They've looked at it and been like, actually, that was a foul. We're not going to change it there. But it seems to like leave every one of those instances seem to like leave this like residue. It's like, we're still mad about that call. And it was in this example I'm talking about, it was the right call, but it's not being able to like kind of flush out the frustration that you have from it, which is like, dude, I was the same way. I mean, and I would be frustrated if I was a player too, or as a coach. Would you say like, I don't know what the answer is. I do think the answer comes from flushing it out once it's happened and regrouping yourself within 5 seconds and being like, and I don't know. Then there's the other side of it where you do kind of got to stay on the officials to like keep the pressure going there. It's what makes it all such a stupid thing. My point is just like that residue seems to linger with the Wolves a little bit more than maybe I'm just too close to it. Those are the games I'm at and stuff. I don't know. I don't think maybe Finch getting ejected helped or whatever, but that residue just feels a little toxic. And when the stakes get higher and they play another good team during the regular season, it feels like an officiating issue is going to pop up with this team and kind of throw it off for 30 seconds. And when they're playing a good team, again, I'm not sure they have the margin to be thrown off for that 30 seconds. And then what's it going to feel like in a playoff series? Like, because if you're going to play the Thunder or something like this, or the or Denver in the playoffs. Like, this is how Jokic and Shea are going to play,
Mhm.
you know?
Mhm.
So what do you do other than like build that machinery in yourself to be frustrated, but not let it impact you? I'm just saying it impacts this team, and that sucks. And it impacts this team because the quality of officiating is down overall. I get that, but I don't know what the answer is other than to like breathe it in and breathe it out. That to
And
me would be the most productive thing.
and you're asking that from a team
Yeah.
that in your last 4 podcasts you described as moody. And they would describe themselves as moody. Their head coach has described them as moody, right? Like, I don't know if a team that we sometimes question their, you know, uh, PhD level basketball IQ in clutch moments while also being moody, while also now you're just pissed off because you think they missed a call. You know how much my dad loves listening to the pod. He texted me Christmas night. He stayed up for this one. And his answer, I know you just said backup point guard or backup center, and I'm thinking they need another wing. He just said you got to go trade for Chris Paul, because he said you got to have, no Mike in the second half. You got to have someone out there that gets guys in the right spots offensively. And then you got to have someone. I mean, the guy that talks to the officials most when I watch on TV is Joe Ingles. Like, I just think this team would rather play like the answer in 23-24. They would rather play prison style physical basketball like that. And I would rather watch that. I don't want to watch all these. I don't want to watch Jokic take 23 free throw attempts. But that's not how it's officiated. And I just don't know if they have 7 good players right now, like Ant, Julius, Rudy, like which one of those guys is the guy that during dead balls is just kind of like greasing up the officials? Because again, if you go back and watch that fourth quarter, Jokic greases up Scott Foster and says they keep hitting the ball on made buckets when we try to inbound. And that's what led to them kind of catching it, right? It's an inconsistent call, delay a game, but it burned the Wolves. And then I think it pissed Ant off enough that he ended up getting ejected. So, which I still don't fully understand. Like,
yeah, I don't. Right. And that was the thing is I'm not saying the officials aren't muffing this stuff, like that's happening. It seems like a variable that's not going to change, right? Like they're going to continue to make these mistakes, or what the players in Finch view as mistakes. So what's the answer? Is it to get more mad? I don't know. Maybe you can make the case that when Finch got more mad in the OKC game, it made a difference. I think some zen would be the best thing, that if this team could drop that ingredient in surrounding officiating, that it would go a long way. Though it's ridiculous that a league making this much money, it has this big of an officiating problem, night to night. And the broader issue is on the league to address that, of finding some sort of way where this is not as defining to the games as it is. And I go back to somebody like Scott Foster, and as you said in there earlier, like my number one thing is when it dysregulates the rhythm of the game, when the officials just try to put themselves into it for their own reasons. And Scott Foster is like the embodiment of that. So why is that guy empowered? Why is he considered one of your best officials? I don't understand. I don't understand, like, what is the NBA's officials room? Like, what are they doing for self-reflection here for how they could be better? Is that happening? But
the reason it's a puzzle is because there's a human element to it, right? I remember last year in the playoffs, someone in the locker room said, like, imagine driving on the interstate and the speed limit was always different day in and day out. Like, that's the analogy here of, like, the playoff whistle does kind of get swallowed a little bit. So all of a sudden, like, I've seen OKC complain about it, ironically, being like, yeah, that's not the same whistle we got in the regular season. And again, it's just a consistency thing. I would much rather watch a basketball game that has way fewer falls and you just kind of got to play through it, than a game where there's just all this. Again, Wolves Nuggets was a great basketball game on Christmas to wrap up the day.
Yeah.
And it ended with a sour note. And the sour note should have been that the Wolves couldn't close, right? Like, it should have been a lot. And it still is, like, a lot of blame on, you're up 9 with a couple minutes left and you let yourself down defensively. That is kind of a bugaboo for this team. Of, it's not, you said in the moment, right? Like, Ant, he's a killer. as soon as he hit one of those threes. And it's like, but I don't know if this team has a killer instinct. And that's something that they have to kind of figure out over these next couple of months. But yeah, they got to figure out just better ways to deal with this ongoing frustration that just leaks into the late game performance and kind of mirrors what should be really good basketball.
What did you mean by you think they kind of need a wing? How are you power ranking the
well,
needs
I
of this
had
team
real
right now?
PTSD to the 2 months we did before the trade deadline earlier this year, where it was like, do they need a bucket getter? Do they need a backup point? I mean, I feel like they need all of them.
Movement shooter.
All of a sudden, movement shooter. I mean, right now in the Nuggets game, and again, Rob's out of the rotation. We didn't mention Bones Highland in the first hour of this. I didn't think he had a great game. He had its numbers, but he had a couple really bad turnovers to start the fourth. But I don't know, man. Like, if the Terrence Shannon Jr. foot thing is just always an issue and you can't get offensive production from Jalen, this team has like 7 good players. And, I think there's a point now where Nas needs to score more or be more productive. But in a league that has so many wings, I mean, we mentioned that Christian Braun, Cameron Johnson, and Aaron Gordon were all out, and the Nuggets threw 3 different wings out there, and I thought they were all productive in their own ways. Spencer Jones is part of the experiment that you and I are dying for this team to do, right? Like, can you just find other guys? So I'm not trying to power rank trade stuff right now. I think the number one is the backup center because the Rudy on-off numbers are crazy. But I do think having another person, maybe that's Kobe White, maybe that's the guard, right, or a wing. But I do think they need more offensive firepower if they're not going to address the backup center spot. So
yeah, it'll just be interesting to see what is prioritized, or it'd be interesting to know how they power rank that out in the front office amongst their group, or in the coaching staff. Like, what are their thoughts on it? Because given the limited assets, right, I don't think they're going to be able to address a backup point guard, a backup wing, and a backup center, right? And if they address any one of those things, it will come at the cost of maybe a player who's currently exists in your rotation, maybe 2 players who currently exist in your rotation. So I don't know. I've found the beginning of the process of thinking about what this team needs to add or to aim at adding at the trade deadline a difficult sort of setup. Because I think there's a couple of things that they need or that they could use. But to me, the most potentially deadly thing is that they get into a series and they cannot defend a scoring big for 48 minutes, the way that they have been for previous seasons. I think there's half measures at the wing. Like, I get what you're saying about TJ. I get what you're saying about some limitations with JC offensively, but it feels to me like there's some half measures at least in there, or that some of the wing stuff could get better. Some of the point guard stuff could get better and has gotten. Bones would be an example of that kind of moving up.
He's one of the 7 good players all of a sudden.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
On Christmas.
I just don't know what the internal development option is, or the internal shift for addressing the bigs that, have some, I think fundamental flaws to them, even though those guys are all really good. Like, Rudy Gobert is having a really good year, especially the last month. Julius Randle's having a really good year, especially the first month. Naz Reid, after, struggling to catch his rhythm at the beginning of the season, is, I thought he played a little bit better than I'm hearing from you saying here. In that Denver game too. Like, those guys aren't disappointments in their seasons in and of themselves. It's the group to me that can't really bend to handle every situation that I think it will need to be a contender. So,
and they have an easy
as
schedule.
Of the 27th, that's where I'm at.
No, and I'm with you because we did an hour talking about the best player in the league and what the performance he put up on Christmas and Nikola Jokic. But you look in the West standings, like, it's pretty clear that there's like 6 good teams and there's a drop off. But how many of those good teams also have really good centers? Like, Şengün's also going to be an all-star, and you got Wemby, and even Ayton's playing, good basketball. He's not in that same tier at all. But I do think, it was highlighted again that having someone behind Rudy, I think Rudy, I'm starting the campaign again for the 5 defensive player of the year. I bet on it. So But when he goes off the court, they need someone to answer that. And then there's a trickle down effect, like you said earlier, of like, if you have someone else that can defend an opposing big, does that free up Julius to invest more of his battery into offense? Does that free up Nas? It's an interesting.
But whose minutes does it take? Like,
Right,
I'm not
right.
saying I don't have the perfect answer to that, because if we get this dream big out there who buys you 12 minutes a night on Jokic, you know, as of right now, that's going to come at the cost of 12 minutes for Nas Reed or Julius Randle. I think they need Nas Reed and Julius Randle there. So I don't know, maybe it's reductive, but what I'm coming back to is like, I think part of this team's identity needs to eventually become the triple big thing. Part of it not you starting it, not whatever. I don't know. I go back to 3 years ago. Worst 2-man pairing was Nas Reed and Rudy Gobert. It's terrible minutes. But if you remember that year, it'd be like 2 minutes here, 2 minutes here. It'd be like these little bridges to get from the Rudy minutes to the Cat minutes and back to the Rudy and Cat minutes. And Nas would be out there with Rudy for like 2 minutes. Minutes sucked. The numbers were terrible. The last 2 seasons, the Wolves' best 2-man defensive rating, as they've leaned into playing Nas Reed alongside Rudy Gobert, has been the Nas and Rudy thing. And that really like nailed something home to me, that sometimes to get something to work, you need to breathe oxygen into it and give it real stretches of time to understand what it is, rather than just playing 2 minutes at a time here and there over the course of 3 months. They started playing Nas Reed at the 4 next to Rudy Gobert and really gave it an opportunity for the last 2 seasons. And the numbers got way better in that pairing. And when we look at the numbers and some of the functionality of the triple big thing right now, it's going to tell you don't play that. But I would just say, remember, it was the same story 3 years ago that said, don't play Nas Reed and Rudy Gobert together. Well, that might be their best defense. That's probably their best defensive front court that they have. It is their best defensive front court that they have right now. So sometimes it's about breathing air into them. It's kind of a cousin of the needing to play multiple shifts for the young guys sort of thing, you know? And much like the young guys sort of thing, I get why it's hard for Finch to get to it. But yeah, really was on my mind, as everybody can tell.
9 of their next 10 starting tonight against Brooklyn, 9 of their next 10 against Eastern Conference teams. They have the 6th most wins in the league. But I did come away from that Nuggets game kind of thinking, like my buddy Nick said, like, you got one of those guys in Anthony Edwards. And I think it kind of clicked to me a little bit why sometimes it feels a little more toxic than ever, because I do think this team for the first time, or, this era for the first time, like, they do have one of those guys and they do have a chance. And now you need to play smarter and you have to really nail some of this backup roster stuff, because, I think they can go toe to toe. You saw it against OKC, second night back to back. Like, they can beat the Spurs. I know Wemby, I know. And they've shown they can beat this Nuggets team when healthy with different iterations of it. So, but it just makes everything a little more. It is. I think these games are more important, and you're learning some stuff against the best of the best. And it's going to be an interesting, I guess, 6.5 weeks leading up to the trade deadline. They're going to devour, to Britt's point, a lot more cupcakes coming up. There's a lot of Wizards and Bulls on the schedule and Nets, but that shouldn't gloss over the fact that I think this team does have an issue or two that definitely needs to be figured out before the playoffs come, which is 55 games or 50 games from now. So they got some time.
They got plenty of time, and they got a guy.
And that's it. Right, that's there. What I Anticlaus, like, no joke. Like, that was the greatest gift I could get on Christmas, other than maybe a dog, is they have one of those guys and he can put you in any game. But now it's really important to make sure, as we celebrate the comeback of Kevin Garnett, that organization could never put enough of the right guys around him to get to that final level. And you have another one of those guys, and you can't let that happen again.
Yep. And it's margins. That's what I think it is. I think it's margins, or, again, like we've been talking about, to what's going on meticulously during the game, and maybe some margins in terms of the roster's construction. But I bring it up because I think if they solve those things, man, I think they can play with these teams.
I do too. Yeah.
They can. And I don't know, a lot of the commentary around the Western Conference or the top of the league and stuff has not included the Minnesota Timberwolves in it. And I think it's because, people who are flying in once a week and watching a game are seeing some of these flaws, the point guard, the big, the whatever. And I think when you're watching something more passively, you go, that's an issue, and thus we'll sink the ship. There's a hole in this ship. And I think by watching a lot, I'm acknowledging the holes, but as I watch Ant ascend to being the best player he's ever been before, surrounded by a team with a lot of talent relative to the rest of the league, I think there's just more answers here than are being given credit for, though they're going to be hard to find, and it's going to take 50 games. And I think if this team does figure it out, it probably will take all 50 games. And it's that idea of like, here we are, April 4th, and we're playing our best basketball of the season. I still think that ramp does exist for the Wolves. It's complicated, will require internal buy-in. Will require smart coaching from Finch, and also probably require the third leg of Tim Conley making another move. But if I'm being honest, man, a month ago, this gap was further for me. The gap was further for me. Now it's like, all right, this isn't a huge gap. Let's put some pieces together here. And I think there's something to be found here. So
Juzang January. Could it happen? Talking about the margins. Yeah. Let it out. Let it happen.
Yeah. I don't know about that, but let's try some stuff.
Okay,
let's try some stuff. Find that. But yeah, I don't know. But that'll come too. Stuff like that'll come too. There's going to be more injuries and more opportunities. And much like they found in January to February last year when DiVincenzo and Randle were injured, it's got to keep stacking, right? Like keep stacking more things that you learned about yourself along the way. But one thing we definitely learned, if we didn't know already, is the Wolves, as indicated by Christmas Day, have a player that can elevate them to a level that so few players in the league currently can. And frankly, at a level that few players in NBA history have ever been able to get to. And I loved watching that at midnight on Christmas Day. It was really cool.
Apologies, and we love everyone for giving us Friday off. It was just tough to kind of do a podcast. As fun as that game was Christmas night, I did text Dane in the moment, 12:30 Central Time, live pod, ? To which he just hit the haha button. But it feels good to be back. I mean, I really do think these next 6 weeks leading up to the trade deadline, they have a lot of easy games, which is going to kind of mirror or, kind of distract you from maybe some of the glaring issues. But I know you and I are kind of back. We'll be doing a live show later in January. And all in all, like we said at the top with the comments about JC, just I hope everyone can close out 2025 on a high note and check in on the people in your life that you love or that you haven't talked to in a while and just see how they're doing. So feels good to be back doing one of these on a Saturday. And I'm excited to hear what you have on schedule next week.
Yeah, man. Appreciate you doing it, making it happen on a Saturday. The next episode will be with Jace on Monday. The Wolves play Brooklyn tonight. I'm actually not going to be going to that game, but I'll watch that at some point on Sunday. And and Jason and I will talk about whatever goes down in that game against Brooklyn, while also probably getting some of his thoughts from this Wolves Nuggets matchup. That was both awesome and I think instructive. So we'll, as we did with the Oklahoma City one last week, we'll dwell on this one a little bit and talk about, it's good for me to get outside perspectives like Kyle's here or Jace's or Britt's, because sometimes we can kind of burrow ourselves into our own takes and thoughts about what's going on. So we'll keep talking about this with the group. I appreciate you making it happen, Kyle. Until Monday with Jace Frederick. He's Kyle. I'm Dane. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah.